Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us. My name is Omar Dahi. I am the director of the Security in Context Research Network. I'm joined today by Rabie Nasser, researcher and director of the Syrian Center for Policy Research, an independent nonprofit research institute that works on policy-oriented research and dialogue in Syria and the Middle East. Uh, the SCPR is one of the core research partners of Security in Context, and they have just issued an article titled Settler Colonialism in Palestine: Structures of Violence and Injustice. Rabia, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Omar. Thank you very much.
So, the abstract for the article is really telling us about the ways in which settler colonialism and military occupation established foundations of intractable conflict in the region. It says that the military occupation and settler colonialism became a model for contemporary colonial behavior and a root cause for the continuation of conflicts, tyranny, and violation of rights. Despite the grave violation of laws, treaties, and international norms, Israeli colonialism received exceptional Western support. In this article, the Syrian Center for Policy Research reviews the multiple routes of conflict established by the occupation, which did not start with the recent genocidal warfare in Gaza in October 2023 and will not end there. So, Rabia, can you take us through some of the ways in which the article argues that Israel established such foundations for intractable conflict?
Thank you very much, Omar. Thanks a lot. I think the most important part of this article is about reading the roots of this conflict. It is intractable conflict with a lot of exceptional cases related to the Israeli occupation. This is overlooked by different politicians, journalists, and intellectuals. So we thought it's very important to highlight a key issues related to the special case, which is Palestine. And we start this by highlighting that this is a direct occupation of Palestine. It's not just 75 years. It starts 100 years before with a gang militias that come to occupied land, to settle in the land, and then they want to expand. Now, we highlight some specific issues. One of this, it's the direct occupation in our time, which is the only case in the world that a country have been completed occupied directly by a colonial power. This is associated with this expansionist feature of this colonial power. They want to expand. We have a lot of wars in our region, started by Israel because they want the to build the country based on the land from Nile to Euphrates. So they want to have more lands every time they want to expand. So it's you can't build even a compromise with a power that need to expand on the rights of the others. So we start by this point and then we expand it to different angles and points that we think that created the foundation of the conflict in the region and fueled it all the time. So every year we have narrative or war or investment in military that expanded this or fueled these roots of the conflict. One of these important issues that building the whole occupation based on the religious idea. So the starting of identity politics, which is we will call that the modern identity politics that have been used in the conflict have been started by the occupation of Israel to Palestine because they use the narrative of the religion to fight against Arab and then Muslims and Christian, and they use it as an evidence. So it's a myths that have been used in different stories, different religions, but they want to translate it into a politics, into real politics. And this is the strange thing that this narrative had been supported by democratic Western countries who claimed secular systems. So this identity politics trigger the hate speech in the region, and we have a spillover over the region about the fight, the polarization based on identity. And I think this is a trigger a lot of cases like Iran or Saudi Arabia to be in this shape, like a state that it's used the religion as a core for holding the politics or for countering the other enemies, quote unquote. And also there is another feature of this colonial power, that they used the military complex or military industry as the core of building the politics. We have the same case around the occupied Palestine, but this started with the state of Israel that used the military backbone for the whole politics. So all the politics and even then the society have been securitized to be around the main power of this colonial entity, which is the military forces. This have been supported by external power, especially the Western countries, highlighting the USA and the UK and France, to make it the superpower in the region. And of course, there is an interest of these powers to have an ally to control or to hegemonize the region. But for us, the main point that you are not building a quote unquote normal state. You are building a conflict centered state by design. Also, we look for the history of genocide, massacres, and grave violations of human rights. It's the history from 100 years. It's repeated every few years. So our people in the Middle East grew up for generations to see the humiliation, to see how the people, the children, the women have been forcibly displaced, because this kind of mentality that we are here to settle and to get rid of the indigenous population. So all the time we see this humiliation, we see this suffer of millions of people who migrated across from Palestine to the different regions. And of course, we see it also for the people from other countries who have been occupied, and part of it still occupied by Israel, like Golan in Syria and part of Lebanon. So this suffer of migration and this grave violations, this massacres and genocide, that like what we see today is something have been repeated with huge protection for this exceptional colonial power. So these, you can see many cases that have been normalized in the political order, in the global political order, or from different international community actors. And then we go through some interesting evidence, we start to see the evidence of Western support, like using the political power, the Security Council, using the export of military support, or building this kind of economic support for the occupation. And there is no sanctions in this case. It's the opposite. So sanctions have been used around the world against any actor who violate human rights. This is at least the Western narrative, that we are the power who want to promote democracy, and we are the power to support human rights. Any violations against the human rights, we will impose sanctions, and we might use the power to promote this. Of course, this is what we hear as a de jure narrative, but even this, it's the opposite in case of Israel. The more that we saw violations from the Israeli occupation, the more you can see increasing in the support from Western countries, from political point of view, from military point of view, and actually the interest, even the interest for the Western countries, cannot explain this violation of their narrative, because it is a huge fall of the whole democracy and human rights narrative because of this contradictory of these policies. And then you can't blame why this region, so the US or Western countries, as a colonial power based on the history of their direct occupation of us and their rule as a direct occupation now by supporting Israel, invading Iraq, supporting conflict in Libya, etc. So we have this narrative, which is we called it special because it is an exceptional case comparing to what Western countries conducted in several countries, especially if we are not talking about the US, about Europe, because I mean Western Europe in general is not doing this like bluntly as they did in Israel. And I mean, finally, this is also a very important issue why we have this illusion. It's not just because of a political power in Western countries who use this narrative to support Israel, which is a huge, which has a huge negative impact on the whole region. So the whole region start to convince that okay, then we don't have any breakthrough unless we have the power. So countering this occupation didn't succeed it unless we use the power, and then it's a military power. It's not any power. So the withdrawal from South Lebanon, it was because of a military resistance. The withdrawal from Sinai, it's because of 1973 war. Also, the peace talk, it was after Intifada, the first Intifada. So what you are telling the people, you are telling the people in this region that there is one way to take your right back. If we talk just about political economy, about how understand what they called it, the real politics. So this is the only chance for those people to take their rights, because neither the Security Council, neither the global power want to compromise or want to give right back. So I think this is what make the conflict as, I mean, daily part of our lives. And I will conclude with this, as the article highlighted the illusion of knowledge production. Like, you know that there is now a trend, like let's decolonize the knowledge production, let's make it more local, more indigenous, etc. Let's get rid of the mainstream that stereotype other populations, other people. And unfortunately, if you look for Israel in as one example of this, if you look for Israel in the international data sets that have been used widely about governance, democracy, development, you see that they ranked it on the top of the 15%, between 15 and 10% of the best countries in the world. And this is not by chance. I mean, this means that you are ignoring the occupation. You are ignoring that there is Palestinians. So who are now in the Palestine, 50% of the population. So those are out of the calculation for democracy, for violations, for development, for gender inequality, and this process uh, created this monster, which will create more conflicts in the region. But I think this is not the only problem. What happened in the last 4 weeks is beyond that, is unprecedented. If you see one explosion from what happened in Gaza, one of them, and there are thousands, you will stop a war in other case. You will create a huge coalition around the world to stop this massacre. But you saw, as a Western political power, you saw all of these violations, and which is unprecedented in this case, that it's videoed, that it is live, that the people, all everybody see it, everybody see the children, the women, the civil infrastructure, the collective punishment. And at the end you say, for the Israeli occupation, please continue. This is a huge failure of the whole narrative around the world. This is will build a new political narrative. We criticized the Trump narrative that that violates many of the minimum political order, or the minimum of the rights for humanity in the political narrative. But now we have degraded in this narrative, and I really don't see what is the narrative of the Western countries after this war, how they will adjust to all what they accepted and supported militarily and politically, in terms of this genocide against people in Gaza.
Thank you, Rabia. I think that's a very important aspect to point out the history of this. And the reason I thought the article was remarkable, it's because it shows several aspects of the negative impact that the establishment and continuation of the occupation. So one of them, as you mentioned, is the established the foundation of, let's say, negative norms or perverse norms of rather than an establishment of positive norms. So there was this contagion effect, regional contagion effect of these negative norms that includes violations of international law, human rights. A second aspect is the hypocrisy of the West. Basically, that this was all happening not with pushback from the West, but with the full support of Western countries or the hegemonic powers globally. Initially, Britain and France, and then the United States, and then finally the providing an incentive structure for militarization and securitization that establishes the foundation that the social problems can be solved through military force and securitization and policing and oppression. So much so that Israel, as you mentioned in the article, became like a model increasingly now for authoritarian governance, training police forces in the US, supplying repressive material to Colombia and its own civil war, and so on. I had another question for you in terms of the approach that SCPR takes is always looking at multidimensional aspects of justice and of deprivation. One of the issues that has come out over the past 20, 30 years is that what we're missing is simply more economic development. There's more economic growth that is needed. So the idea of the Oslo Accords was that you'll establish more infrastructure and more economic support, and that will create the incentives for peace. So given that the SCPR's focus is on socioeconomic issues and does examine these issues quite carefully, what is your assessment of that? Because now there's this idea that is being argued that after the destruction of Hamas, quote unquote, which of course means the destruction of Gaza, we can address this issue. This is a narrative by some Western countries. We can promote socioeconomic development and improve the conditions of the Gazans and link it to the more the West Bank style development. What's your assessment of this approach to saying that economic development will be a solution to bring out, the prospects for more peaceful coexistence?
Well, we have. If we look for from the economic point of view, I think first, if we talk about colonial mainstream, we can start with this: that economic growth is not our development. Economic growth is increasing the inequalities, not in the south, not in the developing countries. It's increasing it in the Western, most industrial developed countries. So this model that there is a dividend will come and the reward from the economic growth, it's actually it's part of this illusion that economic growth will be benefited the whole population. And the European um, agreements with the South Mediterranean countries in this cooperation to the prosperity of the South at that time, which started Barcelona 1995. You can see that it increased the degradation and deterioration in the development. So looking for the development from the interest and benefit from economic opportunities is not the it's not the right narrative, actually, or not the best way to make development happen. And with the support of European, we have many cases that failed. They said the peace talk and the peace agreement between Egypt and Israel will give Egypt the prosperity. They said this will happen to Jordan. They said for in Oslo Accord that the Palestinian Authority will enjoy the dividends of peace. And can we see the indicators there? And you can see how this did a negative impact. Actually, we have more authoritarian regimes, and we have less development. We have more inequalities in these regions, and we have more police control, which is supported by what we called it the external power support. It's not the opposite. So from this narrative, I can't see any different from this perspective to give a political solution. Yes, these actors are ignoring that the Gaza people, Palestinian people, Lebanese, Syrians, Jordanian, and Egypt people, if you want to talk about democracy, they refuse this occupation. If you can't deal with this occupation, then and you want to sustain it, so you are the enemy of people. You are doing a policies against people, and economic incentives will not solve this. The second point, that the idea of humanitarian support that have been conducted by different donors, by different European and Western countries, Eastern countries as well, is to reduce some impact of the or negative impact of the conflict, but it's not solving any of the roots. We can see that humanitarian aid and support was enormous in Syria in the last 12 years, and it didn't build a foundation for development. It built a cycle of dependency. It's reduced part of the impact, but it didn't create any foundations for new development or for new narrative for the development. So what I mean, it's this old story about that you will have positive impact from the peace. Why we don't address the occupation, that you will have a dividends from withdrawing from the land that you occupied. You will be in peace if you have an agreement that gives the other people rights. You will be in peace if you reduce the violations. I mean, this will not be forgotten forever, that you are destroying a whole society, that you are destroying a whole city. So, did you think that this will create a dividends? This will create security? I can't see any rationale from my point of view in securitization of this issue will bring peace in the future or security in the future.
Well, we'll leave it here. Thank you so much, Rabia. I wanted to point out again that the title of the article that the Syrian Center for Policy Research just published is Settler Colonialism in Palestine, Structures of Violence and Injustice, and you can find it online on their website. Thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you, Omar. Thank you.